On today's episode of Life's Next Lesson Plan podcast, I'll be talking about how the pivotal AP Capstone training I had, alongside reading the book A Curious Mind, changed my mindset and my approach to teaching forever. I'll cover some book highlights and talk you through the Question-Formulation-Technique, or the QFT, that can be used in any situation with any age. It would even be fun to do at a social gathering. Wait, that might make me sound like a nerd. Anyway, hope you enjoy this episode. To those of you who have followed me for a while, you know that I value mental and physical wellness. Personally, I've worked with a few different coaches over the years and even been one myself. If you are looking for education and support in your own wellness journey, I would love to invite you to the wellness community I am currently in that keeps me accountable daily with my nutrition and movement. If you are a Facebook user, you can search for our free group called Team MG. This group is led by my coach, Megan Grimaud, who is a certified trainer and nutrition coach. She offers lots of education and support for your wellness journey. If you want to get to know Coach Megan more, you can follow her on Instagram at all lowercase Megan, MEGAN _Grimaud, GRIMORD, or even listen to her on episode 10 of the podcast. She has also created a discount code for my listeners. Just go to her website, www.team-mg.com, and enter code LessonPlan10 to get $10 off any of her premium coaching packages for the first month. Coach Megan is a busy mom like me who works full-time, so I appreciate her practicality mixed with some tough love to keep me going. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Life's Next Lesson Plan. I'm Rachel, and I started this podcast during my 29th and last year as a high school teacher. The goal of my work with this podcast, as well as my Live and Learn Patreon, is to create a connection where we are all teachers. We all have lessons and stories to share that can help others. I'm so fortunate to be able to extend the four walls of my previous classroom to an unlimited audience where we can all learn from each other. And my guests are some of the most inspirational people with the best stories and lessons I know, which is why I want to share them with you. Their words are something everyone should hear. It is my hope that you are able to take away something from each episode to apply to your own life, whether that be a career search, a path to a more fulfilling life, or some new ideas on some current topics. Today I'm going to go back about 8 or 9 years to when our high school decided to add AP Capstone classes to our course offerings. Attending these trainings changed the way I ran my classroom, and I think the techniques offer a guide for a more hands-off teaching and parenting style that is meant to empower children, and it can also empower adults if you use this at the workplace, for that matter. Just a little bit of background on AP Capstone for those of you who might not be familiar with it. It's kind of a newer advanced diploma program developed by the College Board, who runs all the AP classes. It equips students with critical skills in research, analysis, evidence-based writing, and communication. The program consists of 2 courses, AP Seminar and AP Research, designed to complement other AP classes by focusing on interdisciplinary learning and inquiry-based projects. I first joined a group of teachers at Carleton College in Minnesota for my AP Seminar training before I taught that when the class grew in popularity. After teaching AP Seminar and a few years down the road, when our AP Research teacher retired, then I took over AP Research. So AP Seminar is typically taken in the 10th or 11th grade. This is the foundational course that teaches students how to analyze issues from multiple perspectives, evaluate sources, and then develop arguments. There is a team component or group work component with this, both for presenting the research and then writing research reports and defending the research at the end of the presentation. At the end of the year, there is an exam with short answer questions and some essay writing. So I taught that for a year or two. Geez, it's getting foggy now. And then, as I said, a few years later, I attended AP research training at Loyola University in Chicago when I expressed an interest and my principal chose me to teach the course. AP research is a continuation of AP seminar, usually taken in the following year. So at our school, it was a senior course. The course focuses on designing and conducting a year-long research project on a topic of the student's choice. Basically, it's a 4,000 to 5,000 word paper that they work on throughout the year, and then they deliver up to a 20-minute oral presentation to a panel of 3 judges, and then they have to defend the research to the judges when they ask questions. If students pass AP Seminar and AP Research, they can get what's called an AP Capstone diploma. So if they complete both courses with a score of 3 or higher on the corresponding exams, and they take additional AP classes, I believe it's 4, maybe 5, I have to double check now, as well as AP Seminar and Research, then they get this special designation. Oh, it's 4. Yeah, I just remembered. It's 4. Then they get the special designation on their diploma. What does that do for them? There are some colleges now that it's becoming more well known. I know just from keeping in touch with students of mine who've graduated and who had this distinction, usually what happens is if they are interested in doing research as freshmen on the campus of the university that they go to, they're typically the only freshmen allowed to do that kind of work. Usually that's reserved for upperclassmen, but because they have the background, I mean, basically what they're doing looked nothing different than my master's thesis when I got my master's. They are contributing to the existing body of research. I have had students in that class get published, like in professional journals, so they are finding a gap in the existing research that they can add their research to. And so they become part of that body of professional research. They can publish their work. So it is no different if you have done a master's thesis. That is exactly what they're doing. In a high school setting, they have the teacher, they have a faculty consultant in the area that they are studying in the building, and then they have an expert advisor outside of the building, someone who is familiar with the research, either works in that area or can connect them with any resources that they would need. So not all schools have this. I know I've seen the benefits now firsthand, and reasons schools might adapt it is obviously, as I mentioned, the students who do this, who want to continue in an academic research setting in college, sets them right up. Some of the projects are just amazing, and some of them continue in related fields in college, and it's just astonishing to me what they work on. The courses are also very customizable, meaning students are able to choose topics that they're passionate about. So if, for example, I had a student who knew she wanted to study environmental science, she researched how to implement solar panels at our school, which we are now doing. She went on to study related topics in college. So she was passionate about it. She sort of got a jump start, I would say. It definitely looks good on a college application. So colleges recognize this extra rigor and independent nature of these courses, which it is like nothing else that I have taught, for sure. And it definitely promotes that interdisciplinary learning. So I was an English teacher teaching the course. It was pretty rare if one of my students was actually doing an English research project. I did have a few. But more popular areas of study dealt with science, psychology. We had business, we had art, we had music. So they are actually studying all of these different areas again that interest them and getting the credit in that area and working with adults. My job was to walk them through the research process, the writing process, the presentation, and the defense. I was not a content expert. I learned a lot, but I was not a college or a content expert. I had to have statistics teachers come in to teach them that part of it. That was not my expertise. So, AP Capstone, this type of class is ideal for students who enjoy research, they enjoy writing, presenting. They definitely have curiosity, which we're going to talk about today, and an interest in challenging themselves to learn more about an area that they're passionate about. AP Capstone provides this framework for academic and personal growth and definitely sets them apart from other students and sort of fast tracks them, like I said. So just some sample projects. There are so many that I saw when I taught the course, but one example is I had the student who studied the solar panel implementation. I had a student who wanted to explore more affordable housing in Milwaukee and actually priced out and did plans for 3D printed houses in Milwaukee. I had a student who was working with, could you compare AI generated architecture, so done by machine learning, to actual architectural plans in a certain area in the United States, a certain kind of infrastructure. That was fascinating. I had a student use machine learning to study if the traffic lights on our main road going into town near our school was efficient and how it could be made more efficient by studying it. So he had a camera set up on the main road. I had a student with mussels in a aquarium in her garage. That was round one. They didn't make it through the Wisconsin winter, so there was a round two, but she was studying the impact of microplastic on indigenous mussels. And then the last year I taught it, I had a student create an app to detect how many microplastics were in different brands of bottled water. So you could take the app, scan the bottle on the grocery store shelf, and it would tell you the percentage of microplastics. These are high school students. And because we're on a trimester system, these students were doing this from September until they presented their research at the end of February, beginning of March. Whereas other schools, the AP test isn't until May, but our classes were already over by then. So they were doing this in a very rapid pace. So it is beyond amazing. So I could go on forever about it, but we're going to talk about curiosity today, and we're going to talk about how using questioning, I think, can really be a game changer, whether it be in a boardroom, in a classroom. This works for any place that you need to do idea generating. So when I was getting ready to teach these classes, the biggest component, I had watched the previous teacher teach AP research. I had taught AP seminar, and what I knew students needed was kind of two things: a high level of curiosity and a high level of grit. If you're not interested or passionate about what you're studying and you're not going to stick with it when it gets difficult, it can be very difficult to persevere and succeed in those classes. So when I was preparing to teach these classes, I read a book. I can't even remember how I stumbled across it now, but it is one of my favorite books. It is called A Curious Mind: The Secret to a Bigger Life. And it's by film producer Brian Grazer, but it was actually written, co-written with Charles Fishman, who is a journalist. So Brian Grazer is an Oscar-winning producer, and the whole premise of the book is these curiosity conversations. So I'll mention some of the movies that he is attributed to, and you will recognize them. The way most of these movies came about is from these curiosity conversations that he had. So Grazer views curiosity as his most valuable trait. It helps him problem solve. It helps him, like I said, create movies. And his premise related to the lesson I'm going to teach today is on how thoughtful questions can open doors. And for decades, he had this big list of people that he invited into his office to have these scheduled conversations. And if they couldn't geographically make it to his office, then obviously you could do that virtually or by phone. So some of the people on his list are Steve Jobs, he spoke to, Barack Obama, Jonas Salk, Isaac Asimov. I mean, the list goes on of just the biggest names that you can imagine. Just to give you a couple of examples of like who he talked to and what some of the conversations contained. His conversation with author and scientist Isaac Asimov, he wanted to talk with him about creativity and the future of technology at the time that he had the conversation. And so he really took away, I think, from that conversation, just all of the things that are possible with technology and the power of speculative thinking. He also spoke with everybody's, knows Oprah, the media mogul. So he did have a conversation with her. What he wanted to talk to her about was emotional intelligence and how she creates connections with her audiences. And he came away from that conversation realizing that authenticity and storytelling are really the biggest parts of human connection in both art and business. He spoke with Michael Jackson, the pop icon, before his death, and they spoke about creativity and the drive for perfection. And during that conversation, Michael Jackson talked about his relentless pursuit of innovation in music and performance, and Brian Grazer really related to this in his own drive to keep pushing the boundaries in his filmmaking. He also spoke with humanitarian and royal icon Princess Diana before her death, and the focus of that conversation was on using her visibility for positive change. She obviously had a hard time balancing her public persona with her personal struggles. And he felt that by talking with her, it gave him a deeper understanding of vulnerability and influence. And this, again, all of these conversations played a part in the characters in his films and ideas for his films. So Grazer's book highlights how these conversations enriched his understanding of life and human behavior. And it's just a reminder of how important really good, engaging questions can be and how they can really build a connection between people. So during his Hollywood career, Grazer used curiosity to sort of understand audience desires so that he could craft compelling stories and guide his team to create successful films. And some of the films that he's known for are A Beautiful Mind and Apollo 13. He worked with Ron Howard on a lot of his films as well. So together they were able to kind of overcome fears, step outside their comfort zone, and use curiosity to take some risks based on sort of all of this inspiration from other creative professionals. So I think the core message of today is about curiosity, how it's a powerful tool for growth, connection, and innovation. By cultivating curiosity and seeking out new experiences, we can live richer, more meaningful lives. We're going to take a little break from our learning for a second for a new segment that I'm trying out called Ask the Teacher Anything. So you can submit questions to me on social media at Life's Next Lesson Plan, or else on our website, there is a box for you to submit questions at our website, lifesnextlessonplan.com. So I'll answer two of the questions that I've received today. And the first one is, if you miss the idea of teaching when you're done, would you consider something like private tutoring? Or do you feel like that would bring the same issues as teaching in a classroom, like dealing with parents, etc.? So it's a good question. This is definitely something that I did while I was teaching. And in fact, one year when our school laid off 10 teachers, the youngest teachers, I was one of them at that time, which coincided exactly with me having my daughter. So this would have been almost 18 years ago now. And so I did tutor. I was the director of a local tutoring center for a while, and worked mostly at night and stayed home with her. I actually taught one class, and then after school I would go in and work at the tutoring center. And then I've also private tutored for the ACT and for college essay help a lot. There's really no issues that come with private tutoring. I think the biggest thing, if you do it while you're teaching, is just you teach all day and then at night or on the weekends you're also teaching, and it can be kind of draining. So I don't really advertise my services anymore. Anytime I get a client, it's always word of mouth. Who did your son use for the ACT? Or parents obviously will be talking about ACT tutoring, and it'll come up and someone will give my name or number. I'm always open to it, especially if it's a favor for somebody. I love watching the difference that one-on-one tutoring can make. I wish there were more opportunities for that in a traditional education system, because I think kids grow so quickly through that. So I'm not opposed to it, but it's not something that I'm going to actively pursue, if that makes sense. So, second question was, what was the final straw to get you to make this decision? Great question. I don't know if there was a final straw necessarily, although my goodness, I had a student this week, first hour of the day, where I was like, is your sole purpose this entire hour to remind me that I made a good decision by doing this? Because, I had no patience left by 10 a.m. So I would just say there definitely was a period of years where I was like, I don't know how much longer I can do this. It's not even that I don't enjoy the job or it's too incredibly stressful. It's just how much it has changed, and the expectations are different. Kids are so different. I think all of the factors that you're hearing about in all of these books, like The Anxious Generation and Dopamine Nation, with their attention spans waning and their motivation and perseverance waning, it's just becoming more difficult. You feel like you have to put on a stand-up comedy routine some days. I don't know if I've always been naturally introverted, and I think teaching takes a lot out of me throughout a day, because I just noticed I was growing less and less comfortable. Not comfortable, but I guess having less and less energy, or it was taking more and more out of me, maybe. And that just added with my commute increased, getting ready to be an empty nester. And I think I just kept reading, books and talking with people and watching some of the people who I used to teach with, who are now retired, lose their health and quality of life. And I just kept saying to myself, what are you waiting for? I went through a lot of struggles and conversations with people saying, you're so close to being fully vested in your retirement. This is the most foolish mistake you can make. And it might be financially. But I always have a plan, and I'm obviously going to be very smart about what I do, but I also know that tomorrow is not promised. And I just felt that it was time. The things that used to keep me going and bring me the most joy were starting to just become a chore, less joy and more chore, and just limited energy and limited patience. So I really appreciate those questions. I could go on forever, obviously, about those. So keep them coming. Maybe a little bit more lighthearted for some of them so that we can laugh as well. So you can submit those again on social media at Life's Next Lesson Plan or on our website at lifesnextlessonplan.com. We have made it to the lesson part of today's podcast. So this is the technique I've been raving about and have been teased about for how much I like it, but it is, as you will find, so versatile. Literally can use it with any age in any situation. So the Question-Formulation-Technique is an instructional strategy designed to promote critical thinking and engagement. I thought about editing out my dog's barking in that part right there, but it just goes to show you everybody can get excited about the QFT. So this is where we are going to talk about how this could work. I will be attaching a guide for how to use this. So if you're not able to take notes right now, no problem. I'll attach the doc in the show notes for you. So how the QFT works is that first you set a focus. So this is where you decide if you want to start with a word, a topic, a prompt, a statement, a piece of art, a photograph, a math problem, something that's relevant to whatever kind of brainstorming that you're doing. You put this in front of your students or audience, and then you could set a timer if you want for, say, 5 minutes, and you just tell them to brainstorm as many questions as possible related to whatever your focus was. The rules are: don't stop to evaluate or answer the questions, write down every question exactly as it is said, and convert any statements into questions if needed. When the timer goes off, or whenever you decide they are wrapping up, then you have them go through and identify which questions are open-ended and which questions are close-ended. Close-ended questions usually are answered in a yes or no or just a short fact. And you could, if you wanted to, if it's important to what you're doing next, you could have them practice rephrasing the close-ended questions to make them open-ended. Then once you have a nice list of questions, students or your audience will select their top 2, 3, 5 questions based on the relevance, importance, or curiosity, the ones they would like to explore more, or if you've set an objective for what you're doing, the ones that seem to fit what you're doing the most. So then they plan how to use their questions. And again, this is based on the outcome to be determined. So if this is for a research project or this is for a discussion, then perhaps however those questions align to what the lesson goal is, those are the questions that the students would be pursuing, or maybe you want to use those as discussion questions. It's however you can tailor it to what you would like the process to look like. So you can also add in a reflection if you want to just have them reflect on how questioning helped deepen their understanding of something, or hearing other people's questions sparked ideas for them they hadn't thought of. I know that happened for me. We did this at the seminar training, and I remember, because we were grouped with people from other disciplines, thinking, wow, I would have never thought of those questions, but everybody is bringing their own knowledge and experience to the table, which is part of what makes it so cool. So doing this again encourages student-centered learning and active participation. You can require that maybe everybody have a different color marker and that everybody must write in their color. That must show up on the paper. We do that a lot in the classroom to encourage everybody being involved. That way also, if they're shy, they maybe wouldn't even have to say it out loud. They could just write it on the paper. This pushes their critical thinking and their inquiry skills, promotes them to collaborate, and can broaden discussion, helps them connect to real-world applications, or again, as I mentioned, open their eyes to other disciplines or ways of looking at things, and then it provides a nice structure for exploring complex topics. So in the guide that I'm going to attach in the show notes, I'm actually going to add a specific example for an elementary school, and then I'll talk about a couple more examples as well. So I thought of grouping students together. You could have maybe 4 or 5 students together and have an image of just some hands. It can be a photo that you put up on your screen in the classroom. It could be at everybody's table. And you just set a timer for 5 minutes and have them generate as many questions as they can in that time. There's no right or wrong answers. They're not judging the questions. They're not answering them. So you might, with that age group, get questions like, how are hands different? What are hands used for? What do my hands say about me? So this could be used to introduce a lesson on creativity, or an art project representing all the students' hands in a collage. Or with a little bit older students, it could set up a conversation about similarities and differences. This could even be used as a neat opening day activity where we talk about how we all have hands, we're all similar, but yet all of our hands are different, and how that contributes to our classroom. And the photo that I've included in the guide shows a way that you could actually use this to decorate your classroom at the beginning of the year. I also mentioned in the episode how I used this with the word justice or injustice when I introduced the book The Nickel Boys with sophomores, and just talking about the definition of justice. Is the legal system just? Has our country evolved to become a more just society? And then we even revisited those questions at the end of the book when they were doing research on their own injustice. And then lastly, I could see applications for this, as I've alluded to, in corporate settings for brainstorming sessions, just to get as many ideas on the table. Nothing is too outlandish, right? Because sometimes some of the best ideas, you just never know where they come from. So you could even show a video. You could show an ad campaign. And again, you could go around and around from the different lenses, perspectives, the economic, psychological, social, futuristic. And it's just a really non-threatening way to get ideas on the table. And if you have a focus at the beginning, so you have a word or you have an image or you have a video, it gives a place to start the discussion from. So that's why I love the QFT. It's very adaptable. The possibilities are endless, and it really supports collaboration and inquiry-based learning. I hope you gained some valuable insight and a new tool to use in a meeting or in a lesson. Or if nothing else, picking up the book A Curious Mind will put you in the middle of some really fascinating conversations with inspiring people, which of course is kind of the basis for all the guest episodes on this podcast. Obviously, I just love that. Next week, I'll have another guest here to teach us all about a concept that affects us and our longevity. In the meantime, keep sharing these important lessons and stories. You can find the free resources from our episodes on our website at lifesnextlessonplan.com. I do have more behind-the-scenes content, including my countdown of my last 100 days with students in the classroom on my Life's Next Lesson Plan YouTube, and scenes on Instagram and Facebook. As always, thank you so much for following, and we'll see you next week.